noise was me.
Okay, welcome back everybody to Shmuel Bet. I gave you some homework last week, and I bet you can't even remember what it was. But before I gave you your homework, I had some homework. My homework was to reread the bit in the Koran Sefer about extended marital absence. And to go through it, we spoke about it very briefly at the end of last week's shiur. David Marks pointed it out, and I had read it, but it was a bit complicated, and I'd only read it briefly. So what I said at the end of the last week's shiur was I was going to read it a bit more thoroughly and then go through it with you. And it's quite interesting actually, because what this is talking about is the story. It's relevant to the story of David, Michal, and Paltiel. This I don't know what you would call it. This three. What did you call it, Peter?
Ménage à trois.
I mean, well, I was trying not to use that expression, yes, but this three-way tryst, we shall call it. So the point is it's really very interesting, because from the Jewish point of view, there was this machloket, as we know from the Gemara, about whether the marriage of David and Michal was valid in the first place. Shaul, according to the Gemara, Shaul said it's not valid, and that's why he gave Michal to Palti. David said, well, it was valid, and that's why he calls her his wife. As we know, Palti was a big tzaddik and did not consummate any kind of relationship with Michal, which of course was important, because had he done so, what would that have meant as far as David was concerned?
He couldn't take Michal back.
Correct. He could not have taken Michal back. Now, that doesn't seem to be the case in Near Eastern culture at the time. That seems to be a difference between Jewish law and what was going on at the time, because it seems from this interesting little section that if a man abandoned his wife, then it goes like this. If the woman has the means to continue living independently in her husband's homes, in other words, presumably either she's got her own means or the means are given to her, she's allowed to stay there in her husband's home, she may not remarry, even if her husband is absent for an extended period of time. However, if the abandoned woman has no means of supporting herself and cannot live in her husband's home in his absence, the situation is more complex. And then what happens is you have to decide, why is the husband absent, to decide what the woman's status is. So if the absence is due to political, civil, or personal reasons, okay, in other words, he's not forced to leave, he decides to leave of his own volition, then the wife remarries and she remains with her second husband. The first husband is viewed apparently as having neglected his obligation and loses the right to have her as a wife. So if he goes out on a business trip or something, and it seems to be that 5 years, if he goes for 5 years, that's called abandoning. However, if a husband is unwillingly absent, in other words, if he was taken prisoner, or he was kidnapped, or there was a good reason why he was absent and it wasn't through his own volition, then this is the interesting bit. During the period in which she lives with her second husband, she is viewed as still belonging to her first husband, and she's required to return to her first husband, even if she already gave birth to children belonging to her second husband. So that is the difference between the halacha and this different this different situation in the east, whatever it was, I can't remember, Hammurabi and Eshnuna. Anyway, Near Eastern cultures, because that second scenario could not happen in Jewish law, because once she's already cohabited with another man, she's then not allowed to go back to her first husband. So that was interesting. The rest of this then talks about what Michal's legal status would have been, but I don't think it's relevant because she never consummated the marriage with Paltiel, so it wasn't a marriage, and therefore she went back to David. So that was my homework. So now you know all about Hammurabi.
What
Can
about,
I?
Go on, Paul first. Go
I
on.
know there was a sword there, but what about rules about not being alone with a woman? I mean, that's also a rule, is it not?
It is, and of course, you could take that. You could say that they transgressed that rule. However, they were actually, according to Shaul, married. It's only because of Paltiel's tzidkus that he wasn't sure about this whole thing that he did that. So yeah, and we know, of course, don't we, from our chapter here, that Paltiel was very fond of Michal. He cried his eyes out when she got taken off him. So presumably they did have a very good relationship, only they didn't have an intimate relationship. Yes, Hannah, did you want to say something?
Yeah, about your homework. It was a problem after the Holocaust when women didn't know what had happened to their husbands during, and I think at the time it wasn't 5 years, it was 7 years. After 7 years, if nobody knew anything about what had happened to the husband, women were allowed to remarry.
Yeah. And of course, there were some horror stories that occurred in that situation where, at a later date, it was found that the husband was still alive.
Yeah.
There was one story I heard. I don't know if it was a true story because I didn't hear it firsthand. But there was a story I heard that a young couple, not long ago, maybe in the last 10 years or 15 years or so, a young frum couple got engaged, and of course, in frum circles they don't go out for very long, and so the extended family don't know one another. Anyway, it came to the vort, and the grandparents of each of the chosen and kala came to the vort, and it turned out that the grandfather of the chosen had been married to the grandmother of the kala back in the day. Each of them had thought that the other had not survived. Each of them had remarried, and this couple were the grandchildren of a very complicated situation. I don't know what the end result of this story was, but I do remember hearing this story. That can you imagine that? I mean, that must have been horrific. Must have been horrific. I'll try and make some inquiries as to what the outcome was, because in fact, it could be argued that they're all actually. I'm just thinking this through off the top of my head now. This might be rubbish, but I'm just thinking it through. Help me out. If we say that first marriage was never annulled, it was always a marriage. Therefore, the child, certainly the child of the woman,
Mamzer,
is a mamzer, but the child of the man is not a mamzer, because he's allowed to have two wives al pi halacha. Doesn't make him a mamzer. I was going to say that they were both mamzerim, and so the kids could marry one another, but they're not actually. The grandchild via the mother is a mamzer or mamzeres, but the other one isn't. What a mess. what a mess, and what a tremendously stressful and oh, I can't imagine what that must have been like if it was true. I'm going to do some bit more research on that and see if I can find any more information, because it's an interesting story. Anyway, that was my homework. Do you remember what your homework was, anyone?
Yes, to decide what was wrong with that since the Pasuk 18.
Yes, well remembered. And what's the answer, Paul?
Well, the only thing I could think of was that he says that the Lord has spoken of David, saying, well, I'm not sure where he's spoken of him saying that.
Very good. Okay, let's just go through this in detail. What I ask you to do, and Paul remembered that very well. And let me get the screen on for you first of all, because it's there on the screen. Chapter 3, verse 18. Avner says, I'm going to get the rest of Israel on side, David.
Yeah.
Yes, Peter, you got?
No.
No, okay. You can see the screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so verse 18 says, and now do it, for God said about David, saying, by the hand of my bondsman David shall I deliver my people Israel from the hand of the Philistines and from the hand of all their enemies. So what Avner does is he goes to Yisrael, not Yehuda, he goes to Yisrael, basically Binyamin and his co-tribes, which Shaul is the king of, or was the king of. Ishbosheth is now the king of. And he says to them, it's a good idea now for us all to come under one kingship of David. Why is it such a good idea? Because Hashem has spoken about David that he is going to deliver my people Israel from the hand of the Philistines and from the hand of all their enemies. And I asked you to find out what was wrong with that pasuk, and David and Paul is quite correct. Hashem never said any such thing about David. He did say such a thing about somebody else. So Paul has got half the answer right, that he did not say any such thing about David. There is no pasuk that tells us that David will deliver my people Israel from the hand of the Philistines. However, there is a pasuk which says a very similar thing. Anybody know what I'm talking about?
Could it be Saul?
Yes, very good, Michael. Are you remembering this? Because we have learnt it. It is in Shmuel Aleph, and it is in chapter 9, and there it is on the screen for you. When Shaul was first going to be crowned, you remember the whole story. He lost his father's donkeys, and they went looking for them, and he turned up at Shmuel, who was the Navi, and Hashem had said to Shmuel, verse 16, at this time tomorrow I shall send to you a man from the land of Benjamin, and you shall anoint him to be a ruler of my people, and he will save my people from the hand of the Philistines. Okay, let's look at the Hebrew. V'hoshia et ami miyad pelishtim. And Avner borrows that pasuk in our 18 and says, Hoshia et ami Yisrael miyad pelishtim, almost word for word. So what Avner does is he either deliberately misquotes God and says that God had said about David that he would save the Jews or the Israelites from the hand of the Plishtim, when actually he hadn't said any such thing. He'd said it about Shaul. Or alternatively, Avner was using his knowledge of the fact that Shmuel had told Shaul that it was all over and David was going to take over from him, and has extrapolated from Hashem saying that Shaul is going to save the people from the Plishtim. Shaul is no longer. David is meant to be taking over from Shaul. Ergo, Hashem must mean that David will save the people from the hand of the Plishtim. So it's a little bit of spin, I think, from Avner.
Creative interpretation.
A what interpretation?
Creative.
A creative interpretation. Yes. So that's an interesting little aside that Avner does that. Of course, the people will just accept that most likely at face value, because who's speaking to them? Avner. Avner is chief of staff. Effectively, he is the ruler, and it is very much in his power to deliver the people to David, as it were, in a peaceful manner, without David having to go to war against Binyamin, which is what David is trying very hard to avoid. Of course, we had Avner causing a war between Binyamin and Yehuda earlier on, when we had the situation where we had the 12v12 and they all died, remember? And then they had this mini civil war where 380 people died. That was Avner's fault, because he was the one that started all of that. However, he's come round now to realizing that his bread is buttered on the David side and not the Ishbosheth side. So he's crossed over, and now he's going to fulfill his promise to David to deliver the people into David's hands, and we'll have one united kingdom of Israel under the kingship of David. And as I said at the end of last shiur, and then they all lived happily ever after. Only they didn't. Only they didn't. No, they didn't. And those of you who are learning Gemara Sanhedrin with us will know that they did not live happily ever after, because this is a bit like a total eclipse of the sun, this, because our learning of Gemara and our learning of Tanakh are absolutely confluent at this point. In the Gemara, we're learning, for those of you who are not doing it, we are learning the halachas of what a king can and cannot do with a dead person in terms of mourning, and the proofs that are being brought are from this chapter of Shmuel Bet, and specifically the fact that David is going to be mourning Avner in a few minutes, because Avner is about to get killed. So those of you who didn't know the Gemara, I've just spoilt it on for you. But those of you who are doing the Gemara already knew this. Let's carry on. So we got as far as verse 21. Avner said to David, I'll go up and gather all of Israel to my lord the king. They will make a covenant with you, and you will reign over all that your soul desires. And David says, good boy, off you go. And David sent Avner off, and he went in peace. And that's an important little phrase there. Vayelech b'shalom. He went in peace. In other words, this was all peaceful. There was no suggestion of any challenge to David's leadership at this point. Avner was going to deliver the people peacefully. That's important. And then, meanwhile, back at the ranch, as it were, verse 22, David's servants and Yoav, who is Yoav?
Yoav was his chief of staff before.
Yoav was his current chief of staff, actually. Yes.
Okay.
His current chief of staff. And he and David's servants had been away pursuing a troop, and they brought much plunder with them. In other words, they'd been off fighting on behalf of David and had brought with them, as a result of their fighting, they'd brought the spoils of war, the booty, plunder, okay? They brought it with them. Now, why are we being told that? We're being told that because this cements Yoav's place as an important person in David's court. As Hannah said, he's the chief of staff. Now, the Tanakh tells us, Va'avner einenu im David bechevron ki shilchu vayelech b'shalom. Now, Avner was not there with David in Hebron when Yoav turned up. Why? Because he'd been sent off b'shalom. He'd been sent off in peace. We just read that in the previous pasuk. Right. So what happens is, verse 24, Vayavo Yoav el HaMelech, Yoav comes to the king, Vayoma, and he says, Me'asita, what have you gone and done? Hine ba Avner elecha, Avner has come to you, Lama zeh shlachto vayelech haloch. Why have you sent him off? And he's gone. Why have you sent him off with a job to do on your behalf? In other words, why have you trusted him?
Hey.
Why have you trusted him? He's not to be trusted. Look, verse 25. Yadata, don't you know? Et Avner ben Ner, ki lefatotcha ba. He came to entice you. He came to trick you. He's come to pull one over on you. V'ladat et motzoacha ve'et mova'echa. He's come to know what are your goings out and your comings in. What are your goings out and your comings in?
Where you are.
What does that mean? He wants to know your goings out and your comings in.
You're coming and going.
What you're up?
Yeah.
The strengths
Yeah.
and weaknesses.
Say that again, Paul.
Strengths and weaknesses, I said.
Strengths and weaknesses, yes, all of those things, your coming and goings, you want to know your business, but specifically, going out and coming in refers to one specific type of activity in Tanakh, and we've had it over and over again. What do you go out to do?
To war, to
Hello
wage war.
again.
Wage war.
War, correct. To
Ah.
war. So going out and coming in refers to war plans. We know that because we've seen it in the Torah itself. Yoshua is described as going out in and coming in front of the people, and he's the leader. And we've seen it earlier on in Tanakh. Going out and coming in refers to war. So Yoav is saying, you silly king, Avner came to try and find your war plans, and you've been taken in by it. And now you've sent him off to the other side. He's going to go and tell them that you are expecting a bloodless coup, and he's going to go and spill all the beans on your war plans or lack of war plans to your enemies. And you've been duped. Okay, so that's what he says in verse 25. Now, what does David say in return, in response? What does David say in response?
Nothing.
Correct. Nothing. Nothing. We do not know what David says. Now we'll come back to that maybe a little bit later, but that's a bit surprising, isn't it? You'd expect David to say, oh, Yoav, don't be such a conspiracy theorist. Avner's a good fellow. He's turned over a new leaf. He's now on our side. Don't be so grumpy about Avner. Or you might expect him to say, Yoav, maybe you're right. Maybe you ought to go and just keep your eye on Avner and see what's going on. But we have no idea what David's response is at this point, right? Bear that in mind. Yoav, on the other hand, is not waiting for a response at all. He's on verse 26. Vayetze Yoav me'in David. Yoav went out from in front of David. Vayishlach malachim acharei Avner, and he sent messages after Avner. Vayashivu oto mibor ha-sirah. And he brought him back. Can you see that word vayashivu?
Yeah.
It's a causative form. It implies that Avner did not come back of his own volition. Voluntarily, correct. Vayashivu, he brought him back, and presumably he brought him back forcibly. Malachim here doesn't mean angels. It means messengers. And malachim here means a particular type of messenger. And we have a precedent for it. What type of messenger is it? Yes, Philip.
No, I wanted to say something later. In a few, in two more psukim. I just
Okay. Well, when we get there, put your hand up again. What kind of malachim are malachim? What kind of messengers are these malachim?
Messengers of death.
Well, possibly, yes.
But
where do we have this expression that somebody sent messengers to somebody in a situation of confrontation?
There's Jacob and Esau.
Yes,
Yaakov saying.
Yes, you've all got it. Well done, Yaakov and Esau. Beginning of Parshat Vayishlach.
Yeah.
Yes, malachim, messengers. And that was because Esau was coming to confront him. Malachim has got here, it's got the connotation of confrontation here. So messengers have been sent to Avner. Avner has been brought back against his will, Mibor Hasirah, from this place called Bor Hasirah. Anybody know where that is?
Somewhere in the Negev?
No. The answer is we don't know where it is, but we do know that it must be north of Hebron. There's a couple of places which are suggested, both of which I tried to find on Google Maps and couldn't find them. But it's a place, a small place apparently just north of Hebron, which makes sense because where was David ruling from at this stage?
Hebron.
Avner has gone to Binyamin.
He's on his way.
He's on his way. And where is Binyamin compared to Hebron? North. So he's on his way north. So he's not got very far. He's got to this place called Bor Hasirah. And Yoav's messengers have caught up with him and have brought him back to Hebron. But look what happens at the end of verse 26. V'David lo yada. David didn't know anything about this. Yoav is acting independently of David. And you could argue that he is acting without authority.
Yeah, I agree.
It's important that we don't have a response from David to what Yoav said, because in the absence of a response, we can assume that when it says David didn't know, he also didn't approve. Yes, Philip.
Okay, we've come to more or less where I wanted to be for my question. In most cases, as far as I remember when I was a kid, Yoav was considered a good guy by my teachers, by my Tanakh teachers. But in actual fact, you'll see that in a pasuk or two, he kills Avner himself.
Oh, you spoiled it
purely
now.
out of personal reasons. It's purely out of personal reasons. He wasn't such a good guy, Yoav. He wasn't protecting David's interests. He was protecting. Well, he was because Avner had killed his brother. He was
Okay. I'm going to stop you there because you're stealing my thunder, Philip.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
All of those things that you've said are absolutely right, and we're going to go into them in some detail right now. Oh,
I didn't want to steal your thunder, only your lightning.
Okay, so David didn't know. Avner's gone off. Yoav has gone off to get Avner. David did not know about it. Vayashov Avner Hebron, And Avner returns to Hebron. Vayatehu Yoav. There's another causative form. Vayatehu Yoav el toch hasha'ar. Yoav caused him, i.e. Avner, to turn aside. Where do we have that word vayatehu? We had it in last week's Sedra, not yesterday's, the one before. Who turned aside to see something interesting?
Moshe.
Moshe, yes.
The burning bush.
The burning bush.
Yeah.
That's right. So here, this is the same word. This is a causative verb. Vayatehu Yoav. Yoav caused him to turn aside, right? In other words, he diverted him. You could get the impression here that Avner is not knowing what's going on. He's all innocent. He's no idea that he's being ambushed. And actually what Yoav is doing is ambushing him. He's caused him to return to Hebron. He's caused him to turn aside, El Tochashah, into the middle of the gate, wherever that is. Ledaber ito basheli. Now, who's got a translation other than what we've got on the screen? Who's got a translation in front of you? What does Shelley mean?
Chevy. Imprisonment.
No, why? That's Chevy with a vet.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Shelley, look at the pasuk. Look at the pasuk. Look at the pasuk. It's with a lamed.
And he's
sorry. Sorry.
Speak to him quietly.
Okay, you've got to speak to him quietly, right?
Yep.
Where's that? What's that in Michael? What translation?
Enough.
I've got to talk to him casually.
The Living Nach. Okay, I like that. The Living Nach says quietly.
I've got casually.
Casually, where have you got that from?
Art Scroll.
Art Scroll says casually. Okay. I'm looking at the Koren. Some reason I can't even find it. Oh, there it is. Basheli, right. Privately, okay. Privately says the Koren. So we've got privately, casually, in peace, and the Chabad translation don't even know what it is and hasn't got it translated at all because he's not sure what it is. Okay, so what might the root of this word be? Well, let me tell you that it seems to be, according to Rav Bazak, that this is perhaps the only place in the whole of Tanakh that this word is used. So it's not surprising that it's difficult to contextualize. Some suggested that it is from the word tashleh, to deceive. And so it would be, and spoke to him deceitfully.
Could it be Shalev?
Yes, it could be. The Radak says that, Hannah. The Radak says it comes from the word shalva. What's shalva?
Satisfaction.
Peace.
No, it's calm.
Shalva is peace, calm, serenity.
Yeah, satisfaction. Yeah.
Shalva. So that seems to be a possibility.
Sweet.
Say that again, Peter.
Sweet. She spoke to him sweetly, no?
Sweetly. Okay, sweetly. Yes. Yoav. It seems all of those things fit, of course, because Avner would have thought that he was speaking to him in peace, because he's no idea that he's about to get done in. Yoav was speaking to him deceitfully, tashleh, because he knows he's about to do him in. So all of those things fit, but it's an interesting word. It appears that it does not appear anywhere else in Tanakh, that word. So interesting. Now, then what happens? Well, you all know this either because Philip just spoilt it for you or because you learnt the Gemara.
Sorry.
Vayakehu sham hachomesh. Right. I'm going to stop after those three words. Vayakehu sham, and he struck him there. Ha-chomesh. What translation do you have in the Nach, in the living Nach for that, please?
In the fifth rib.
In the fifth rib. Okay, that's what we've got on the screen as well. The Koren says in the stomach, and the Steinsaltz says the groin. What does Art Scroll say, please?
The fifth rib.
The fifth rib?
Mm-hmm.
Right, okay. Now then, why do you think that the Koren says the stomach and the Art Scroll and the Steinsaltz says the groin?
Wants it to be very painful. Stabbing in the stomach is slow death. Very
As opposed
death.
to?
A very quick death if you get it in the heart.
Okay, right. Little anatomy lesson for you now, everyone. Can you see that?
The liver.
Can you see that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Nice, isn't it, that?
Yeah. Lovely.
Okay. Where's the fifth rib? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Underneath the fifth rib is just about where the left ventricle is. Is that right, Peter?
Yeah, left ventricle. Yeah,
yeah, left ventricle. What will happen if you get stabbed in your left ventricle, Peter?
Pretty serious. You get a.
You'll die very quickly.
Yeah, you die pretty quick. I would think.
How quickly would you die if you get stabbed in your left ventricle?
Instantaneously, I would think.
2.5 minutes.
No, much quicker than that. If you've got a hole in your left ventricle, instead of your blood being pumped out through your aorta to the rest of your body, it's being pumped out into the chest cavity. So with approximately 10 or 15 heartbeats, you have exsanguinated. So it's not going to take very much longer than 15 or 20 seconds to exsanguinate if you get stabbed underneath the fifth rib. Okay. I once saw this, a most terrible thing, and it affected my medical career for the rest of my career. Peter will appreciate this more than the rest of you. If you have a pneumothorax, if your lung collapses, what you have to do is you have to put a drain in, and it drains out, and it allows the lung to re-inflate, which is all very well if you do it on the right hand side over here. You put the drain in between the ribs into the pleural cavity, and you drain out all the water, and it goes into this huge, used to go into this huge bell jar. Do you remember that, Peter, when you used to do that? Yeah. Anyway, I was an SHO, I was a junior doctor, and a fellow came in with a left-sided pneumothorax. And the registrar said to me, "Come, I'll teach you how to put in a chest drain." And in those days, the drains used a trocar, which is like a, I don't know what you'd call it. It's like a dagger with a tube around it, and the tube is about that wide.
That's the cannula.
Yeah, the cannula is a huge, great big thing. Anyway, he stuck this thing in between the fifth rib there, just over there, and instead of stopping when he got into the pleural cavity, he went a bit too far. Well, actually, he went a lot too far, and he went straight into the left ventricle. And this fellow exsanguinated into the big bell jar on the floor within about 15 or 30 seconds and died.
Did he lose his license?
No, but the fellow lost his life. And I vowed there and then that I would never put in a chest drain on the left side ever. And if I ever had a patient to do that on, I would absent myself and make sure somebody else got the job to do it. And I kept my vow. I never, ever in my entire career put in a left-sided chest drain. Today it's a lot easier because they don't use these great big bell jars and they don't use these great big trocar needles. But back in the 1980s, when this happened, it was a very, if I pardon the pun, it was a sanguine experience. Anyway, that's what happens if you, let's go back to our, that's what happens if you get stabbed in the chomesh. So it may well be right what Michael has said, that our translators in Steinsaltz, 1 minute, Philip, Steinsaltz and Koren want him to die a slower death. But it doesn't really matter which it is. What it does matter is, one second, Hannah, one second. What it does matter is that you have heard this expression before. Vayakehu sham hachomesh. Where have you heard that expression before?
That was where Avner
It killed
stabbed Asael.
Well done. There it is on the screen. Well remembered. What happened was they had a decision that they'd call it all off after the 12 after the fight, and everybody had died. Asahel, who was Asahel, please?
Yoav's brother.
Yoav's brother. Asahel wasn't giving up.
So he did the same thing to Yoav as Yoav had done to his brother. Exactly
Correct.
the same thing.
Correct. So what happened was Asahel ran off to chase Avner. Avner says, Asahel, back off. Verse 21 on the screen. Turn away, right? Turn away. Don't start with me. It'll end badly. Asahel continued, verse 23. And he refused to turn aside. And Avner struck him with the back end of the spear, El HaChomesh. Can you see that? El HaChomesh, under the 5th rib. So what Philip said earlier on is absolutely right, that the Tanakh is telling us very clearly that this was a bit duplicitous from Yoav, because Yoav is pretending to David in a way that he's killing Avner because Avner is a threat to David. But the Pasuk tells us very clearly he killed him in exactly the same way as Avner had killed his brother. Next few words, Vayamot, and he died, B'dam Asael Achiv. He died for the blood of his brother Asahel. Now that Pasuk tells you two things. First of all, that Pasuk tells you very clearly what Yoav's motivation was for killing Avner, right? It was revenge for killing his brother. It also has a problem, that Pasuk. That bit that I just read doesn't make sense, does it? Why doesn't that not make sense? Vayakehu sham hachomesh, and he struck him under the 5th rib. Vayamot, and he died, B'dam Asahel Achiv, and he died for the blood of his brother Asahel.
It's not. It doesn't say who his is. It might not be Yoav's brother. It might be somebody else.
No, it says Asahel. It gives him his name. But you're right. You're on the right lines, Philip. He died for the blood of Asahel, his brother. Implies that Asahel was Avner's brother.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
But it's not. Avner.
It's not very clear.
Yoav, Asahel was Yoav's brother. So that Pasuk,
which would imply that Yoav was Avner's brother too.
Yeah, which is not true. So it doesn't make sense as it stands at the moment, right? It doesn't make sense. So you have to look at the trop. You have to look at the trop to explain it. The trop has on Vayamot a Zakef Katan. Vayamot. And then you've got a Tipcha Mercha Sof Pasuk. Okay. In other words, the B'dam Asael Achiv is one unit. And Vayamot is a separate unit because that note, the Zakev Katan, does not connect to Badam Asay Lachib. So the trop, the notes tell us how to read this pasuk. And it goes like this. Vayakehu sham achomesh vayamot. He struck him under the fifth rib and he died. Badam Asahel Achiv. For the blood of Asahel, his brother. And clearly that when you read it that way, the his refers to Yoav. So just a little grammatical nugget there for you with the trop. Okay, so the situation as it stands. Yoav comes to David and says, "You've been duped. Avner's not the guy you think he is." David does not say anything. Yoav takes the law into his own hands, tricks Avner into coming back, tricks him into being alone with Yoav. Yoav kills him in the same manner that Avner had killed Yoav's brother Asahel. And the Tanakh is telling us the motivation for this murder. Now then, what do you think David's reaction is likely to be to this?
Could be quite angry.
Yeah, he could be quite angry. Now, David, if he's quite angry, might do what?
He might punish Yoav.
Okay, and how would he punish Yoav?
Kill him.
You'd expect that, wouldn't you, Michael? I mean, there's a lot of killing going on here. Apart from anything else, he's acted without the permission of the king. He's gone and killed somebody who, as far as David was concerned, was about to deliver him the United Kingdom on a plate, not the United Kingdom with a capital UK, right? The United small u Kingdom, small k, right? On a plate. And he's gone and spoiled it all now. And what's likely to happen in Binyamin now when they hear that Yoav, who is the chief of staff of David, has killed Avner? What is Binyamin going to think?
They're going to revolt.
Oh,
Yeah. They're going to think that this was all David's doing.
Yeah.
an act of war.
Civil
Yeah.
war.
Yeah. It's an act of war. So David is not too chuffed.
Could it be that David had mixed feelings about Avner while he was alive?
Well, I'm sure he did, Hannah. I think that's a fair observation because at the very least, he's to be wary of him because he's crossed sides.
And that's why he didn't answer Yoav, because internally David wasn't 100% sure about Avner.
Okay, I'll buy that. I think that's fair. But be that as it may, what Yoav has now done has caused David a whole load, potentially at least, a whole load of grief. And now David has to act to undo that grief. Let's see what happens. Verse 28. And David heard afterwards, and he said, who did he say this to? We're not told, but you can assume he said it in public because he says, and who has he said it to, do you think?
To the people.
Which
The
people?
tribe of Benjamin.
Binyamin.
Yes, to Binyamin, because he says, Naki anochi umamlachti. I and my kingdom are innocent. Me'im Hashem ad olam. Before Hashem forever. Forever. It's almost like an oath. It's not quite an oath, but it's almost like an oath. He's invoking God's name. He's saying almost in God's name, I am innocent. This is nothing to do with me. Mi dmei Avner ben Ner, of the blood of Avner ben Ner. I'm innocent. Me and my kingdom didn't do this. Binyamin, don't you go getting ideas that this was my doing. I didn't know anything about this. right? And then what does he do? He curses Yoav. He gives him a good going. This could be a good going Romanish curse, this, right? Yacholu al Rosh Yoav, may it fall upon on the head of Yoav, vel kol beit aviv, on all the house of his father. Al yikaret mi beit Yoav zav u'metzora u'machzik v'falech v'nofel b'cherev v'chaser lechem. May there not fail from the house of Yoav one who has a zav, it's a type of impurity, tsarat, that's a type of leprosy or something, or one who leans on his staff. Who leans on a staff?
Cripple.
Cripple. You'll be a cripple. Who falls by the sword?
A murderer.
Somebody who's weak.
Yeah.
One who lacks bread. In other words, he curses him from here to kingdom come. He curses Yoav. Now, why didn't he kill him? Michael Kraus thinks he should have killed him. Michael, why didn't he kill him?
Because he was
Michael,
faithful.
wait. I want to hear what Michael's got to say. Michael, you're muted.
Maybe he wants to deliver him to Benjamin so they can deal with it.
Okay. Ooh, that's a bit mean. You're very bloodthirsty today, Michael. Okay. I'll let you into a secret. That isn't what happens. Anybody else got a suggestion as why Yoav wasn't killed?
Because ultimately Yoav was faithful to David. That's why he didn't kill him. He was faithful to him. Even though he made this terrible mistake.
He's just caused him a whole load of aggravation.
I know, but he didn't realize.
Okay. All right. Philip says it's because he's
ultimately
loyal to David. Okay. Hannah.
I don't know why he didn't kill Yoav, but okay. In my head, there's a parallel to Yaakov and Shimon and Levi going to kill Shem. They acted without telling anybody. They did it off their own bat. They came back, and Yaakov shouted at them, "What the bloody hell did you do? You've caused me a whole lot of problems now. Now I've got to go and fix it." And Shimon never really got a nachala. He never really got a nachala in Israel. Levi also didn't, because Levi was spread all around the country, teaching in the cities. And there seems to be some sort of parallel there. I don't know what, but there seems to be.
I think that's a very good observation. I hadn't actually seen that parallel myself, but I think that's a very, very good observation, because that's exactly what happened, isn't it? He came back. He says, "You called me a load of aggravation." He didn't kill them, maybe because they were his sons, but he did curse them, didn't he, on his deathbed? Shimon v'Levi achim hei, klei Hamas. They've got their violence is there. He tells them off. You're right. Very good parallel. Okay, that's a good answer. I'll tell you what I was thinking, and I think that this is correct. David did not kill Yoav because he needed him. Yoav is commander of the troops. He can't afford to kill Yoav. He could have a military coup on his hands if he does. So he bides his time, and very much like the parallel that Hannah has just told us, I'm going to extend the parallel, because as we just said, when Yaakov is on his deathbed, he curses Shimon and Levi for what they did. What does David do on his deathbed regarding Yoav?
Wants him killed by his successor.
By Shlomo. He tells Shlomo to kill him. David does that on his deathbed. So there you've got another parallel, which with that story. That's excellent. I'm going to write that down on my Hidushei Poleg sheet, and then I'm going to look it up and see if anybody says that. And if it doesn't, it's going in Hidushei Poleg. Hang on a minute, I have to write it down. Parallel between Yaakov and Shimon and Levi versus David and Yoav. Okay, I'll rewrite it out more fully after the shiur, but that will just remind me what I'm doing. Very good. Excellent.
Yaakov didn't do that, and actually cursed their anger. He didn't curse them.
That's true. Aror apam. You're absolutely right, Paul. That happens to be one of my favorite divrei Torah, and I say it over every single year. Aror apam. Yeah, their anger was cursed and not them. You're right, but I think the parallel still remains. You're quite right, Paul, on that. Yes, Philip. You're muted. Thank God. I mean, you're muted. Philip, you're muted.
I don't know if we're going to reach this now, but in the next pasuk, there's something very, very strange as far as the Hebrew goes. And it's written in Hebrew, Yoav Avishai achiv hargu le Avner. How can you kill to somebody, le Avner? What does that mean? What's the translation of that?
If anybody was in any doubt as to whether Philip has ADHD, there you go. He couldn't possibly wait till we said the next pasuk until we had it. I'll talk about it next week, Philip, when we talk about the pasuk next week.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So we're just about out of time now. So we've got this pasuk here that tells us this curse of Yoav, but he can't kill Yoav because he knows him. I mean, he needs him. He needs him. Okay. All right, we'll do it now. Since we've got 2 minutes, we'll start. The next pasuk says, "Yoav va'Avishai achiv." Yoav and Avishai, his brother, hargu le Avner, killed Avner with a lamed. Now, the first thing before we get to the lamed is who's just popped up in this
Ishai.
Avishai. Where's he come from?
Well, he's Yoav's brother,
So
he's dead, isn't he?
Aye.
He's not dead. No, that's Asahel that's dead.
Right.
There were three brothers. There were three brothers: Avishai, Yoav, and Asahel. Who killed Cock Robin? Who killed Avner?
Yoav
and Avishai.
Yoav.
Yoav. We've just had it here. How did he kill him?
With his fifth rib. His fifth rib. He killed him
with his spear.
He stabbed him just about there. Right?
Yeah.
So why does the pasuk say that Avishai also killed him? Did Avishai hold on to the spear at the same time? We're not told that. We're not even told Avishai was anywhere near. Why?
Maybe after Yoav killed Asael, the two brothers swore to avenge their brother's death.
Yoav didn't kill Asael. Avner killed Asael.
Yoav, after Yoav killed Asael, the two brothers that remained.
Kill Asael. Avner killed Asael.
After Avner killed Asael, okay, afterwards, maybe Yoav and Avishai vowed to avenge his death together. Yeah. So when he did it, it was as if both of them had fulfilled their promise.
Okay, yeah, I think that's fair. There's no evidence that Avishai actually was an accomplice, but you could argue that he probably was an accomplice. Yoav, when he went out to get Avner, probably had Avishai with him. What do we know about Avishai?
He was hot-headed.
He was hot-headed and he was violent. We know that because he wanted to kill Shaul on 2 occasions and David had to pull him back.
Yeah.
So it's certainly not beyond the realms of possibilities that they were in cahoots together, similarly to what Hannah has said, that they've somehow or other vowed to avenge their brother's death. And Avishai, as it were, is taking half the credit for it, even though he may not have done that act. Okay, Hargu le Avner. And I think that what Philip's question is, it should just say Hargu Avner. They killed Avner.
Or et Avner.
Or et Avner. What's le Avner? To Avner. Don't know. I need to look it up. No idea. Anybody got any suggestions?
Could be Avner. It could be that they didn't only finish him off, but they finished off his family also, and that's why they wrote.
I don't think that's the case. I don't know. I need to look. I need to ask a Hebrew scholar. You know, I'm going to ask. I'm going to ask
Avido.
I'm going to ask Ruby. Ruby will know.
Yeah, Ruby.
Avshalom Kor.
Right, so let's just finish this pasuk and then we'll stop. So they killed Avner, and just in case you had any doubt as to why they killed him, Al asher heimit et Asahel achihem begivon bamilchama, because he killed Asahel, their brother, in Givon in the war. Now that's important. We will leave it there, but that word bamilchama is important. Your homework for next week is, why is that word milchama important at this particular juncture? And I don't want answers now. I want answers on a postcard. Remember that? You used to have to write your answers on a postcard. Answers next week. Shior, what have we done today? We have learned that Yoav duped, went against, without David's knowledge, duped Avner and killed him by sticking a spear in his left ventricle. We've learned that Avishai was probably in cahoots with the whole thing. David is not happy with it, and he is cursed Yoav in front of the people of Binyamin. That's important. We've not finished with David's response yet. We'll do David's response next week.
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
Could it be that Hagul Avner, is brought death to Avner in the way that he brought death to Asael? If I read to the end of the pasuk there,
that's true. If the word
it's a verb and thing, but it could be that they brought death to Avner as he brought death to Asael.
Yeah, could be. It doesn't fit with the word hargu, does it? But the English fits nicely. I'll grant you that. Yeah.
Anyway, ask somebody and see.
I will ask Ruby and see if he knows, because he knows all about things like this with Tanakh. Right. Any questions or comments before we close? Okay. See you next week. Oh, don't forget tonight, Esther. Project Esther is with Rabbanit Shani Tarragon, who, for those of you who have not heard her speak, she is an excellent speaker. Very worthwhile tuning in. 8 o'clock on Zoom, not in person. 8 o'clock on Zoom. The link will or already has been sent out. That's tonight at 8 o'clock. See you all soon.
Thanks,
No,
John.
you are.
Thank you.
Bye.